A cook arrived as the rancher's unwanted mail-order bride, but his 6 motherless kids had other plans. Montana Territory, 1884. Ethan Walker waited beside the weathered depot platform with his hat pulled low, watching dust swirl across empty tracks. He had agreed to marry because 6 children could exhaust even the strongest rancher, not because loneliness had conquered him. His neighbors called it practical. Ethan privately called it surrender. The wind smelled of sage, horses, and rain, while uncertainty settled heavier than any saddle ever carried. He hoped the woman would cook well, obey quietly, and stay. Behind him, Noah kept the younger children lined beside the hitching rail with determined patience beyond 13 years. Luke folded stubborn arms. Samuel fidgeted. Benjamin stared silently at distant hills. Emma clutched a faded rag doll. Little Lily balanced on worn boots, asking every minute whether their new mother liked stories. Ethan answered none of them. Promises felt dangerous after grief, and hopeful questions felt even more dangerous than promises. Still, every child watched the road without blinking once together. The stagecoach finally rolled into view beneath gathering clouds, wheels grinding across stone until every horse snorted with relieved impatience. Travelers climbed down carrying polished trunks, wrapped parcels, and city confidence. Ethan searched every elegant face, expecting refined manners matching expensive dresses. Then another passenger descended carefully, lifting battered cookware before lowering 2 weathered suitcases. She paused, straightened aching shoulders, smiled gently, and thanked the driver before touching Montana soil. Ethan blinked twice, suddenly uncertain what disappointed him most first. Clara Bennett possessed warm hazel eyes, capable hands, and a generous figure that invited cruel whispers from strangers before she ever spoke. Her simple blue dress showed careful mending instead of fashionable lace. Flour dust still clung beneath one fingernail, refusing to surrender despite careful washing. She looked neither embarrassed nor defiant. She simply carried herself like someone accustomed to surviving opinions without borrowing bitterness from them. Years of kitchens had taught quiet endurance before unexpected happiness arrived knocking softly. A pair of townsmen exchanged amused glances before laughing beneath lowered voices they assumed nobody noticed. One woman measured Clara from boots to shoulders with practiced contempt. Clara noticed everything. She merely adjusted her grip upon the heavy skillet hanging from one suitcase and approached Ethan with steady confidence. Her first words carried neither apology nor expectation. "Mr. Walker, I hope your family enjoys honest cooking," she said. Ethan nodded stiffly, offering only a brief handshake before turning homeward immediately. Their wagon creaked across open prairie beneath steel blue skies, leaving the depot farther behind with every slow mile. Ethan explained practical expectations instead of welcoming conversation. The marriage would remain respectful. His children required stability. Romance belonged somewhere beyond mountain horizons neither intended chasing. Clara listened without interruption until silence finished speaking. Then she answered quietly, "Respect grows easier where kindness receives room beside hard work." Ethan faced forward, pretending the reply mattered less than passing fences, although it lingered. The ranch appeared beyond cottonwoods, broad, hard-working, and unmistakably tired. Weathered fences leaned. Barn doors sagged. Laundry fluttered without matching pairs because nobody remembered simple domestic order anymore. Noah stepped forward first, introducing every brother and sister before Ethan remembered manners himself. Clara greeted each child individually, repeating every name carefully until smiling faces replaced anxious ones. Lily offered her tiny hand without hesitation, surprising everyone. Even Luke forgot his practiced scowl long enough to smile back shyly once today. Inside the house, Clara removed her apron before unpacking ingredients with almost ceremonial care. Dried herbs, beans, onions, flour, smoked beef, and precious spices emerged from impossible corners of worn luggage. Emma watched wide-eyed as though witnessing frontier magic. Clara invited every child to wash hands before helping prepare supper. Nobody questioned her gentle confidence. Even the kitchen itself seemed relieved someone finally understood its forgotten purpose. Ethan remained outside longer, convincing himself chores demanded attention instead of curiosity alone. Soon fragrant steam drifted through open windows, carrying rosemary, pepper, slow-simmered vegetables, and fresh bread across the yard. Samuel abandoned stacking firewood halfway. Benjamin quietly followed delicious aromas indoors. Noah pretended responsibility required inspection, though everyone recognized hunger instead. Ethan inhaled despite himself. The familiar scent awakened memories buried beneath years of determined restraint, memories connected less with recipes than laughter around crowded tables. He almost turned away, fearing remembrance more than emptiness, yet his feet refused retreat again tonight. Clara stirred the bubbling stew inside an old cast-iron stove with patient circles, allowing each child a small responsibility. Luke chopped carrots. Emma folded biscuits. Lily proudly carried spoons one careful step at a time. Benjamin measured salt beneath Noah's watchful guidance. Their conversation flowed naturally, weaving laughter through ordinary chores until the room sounded strangely unfamiliar to everyone remembering quieter years. Ethan paused outside the doorway, listening without entering, afraid hope might demand impossible forgiveness someday soon again somehow. When supper reached the table, silence arrived first, followed immediately by grateful astonishment. Every bowl emptied quickly before anyone requested another serving with embarrassed smiles. Clara watched satisfaction instead of compliments, seeming happiest whenever someone reached for seconds. Ethan tasted one careful spoonful, then another. The seasoning resembled nothing from his late wife's kitchen, yet comfort settled with exactly the same quiet certainty. Nobody mentioned tears, although several pairs of eyes shimmered beneath lamplight before bedtime arrived peacefully together again. Later Clara found a cracked rocking chair upon the porch and quietly repaired its loose rung using spare leather from her luggage. Ethan noticed without commenting. She seemed incapable of passing broken things without attempting gentle restoration. Watching her work unsettled him unexpectedly. Some people repaired furniture. Others somehow repaired atmosphere. He refused deciding which description fit Clara because either answer felt dangerous. The evening breeze carried quiet laughter across darkening fields, where tomorrow waited unseen patiently nearby still listening. Before bedtime, Clara tucked Emma and Lily beneath handmade quilts, telling a simple frontier tale about brave sparrows finding home after storms. The younger children drifted asleep smiling. Noah thanked her with awkward sincerity usually reserved for adults earning deep respect. Ethan witnessed everything from the hallway shadows. Gratitude should have eased him. Instead it sharpened fears he could no longer comfortably ignore. What happened if the children loved her before he trusted himself enough to try likewise ever again? Long after lamps dimmed, Ethan walked quietly through silent rooms expecting familiar emptiness. Instead he discovered washed dishes drying neatly, tomorrow's bread dough resting beneath cloth, and 6 sleeping children wearing peaceful expressions absent for years. None of those changes required grand declarations. They required ordinary care offered faithfully. Somehow that humble truth carried greater weight than every practical reason supporting this unexpected marriage. He stood beside the cooling stove until dawn birds began singing beyond windows softly alone thinking. Morning light slipped across the kitchen before anyone else awakened, revealing Clara already preparing breakfast with calm efficiency. Ethan lingered unnoticed outside the doorway until Lily padded inside, wrapped tiny arms around Clara's waist, and whispered one innocent word. "Mama." Neither woman nor child realized Ethan had heard. He closed his eyes briefly, understanding the true challenge had never been marrying a stranger at all. It was learning whether he deserved the family forming before his guarded heart now silently. Morning settled over the Walker Ranch with crisp mountain air and pale blue light stretching across the fields. Clara had already kneaded bread, stirred oatmeal, and packed lunches before the sun cleared the eastern ridge. She moved through the kitchen with practiced rhythm, never hurrying, never wasting motion, treating every simple task as though it deserved quiet respect. The children wandered in one after another, drawn by warm aromas rather than repeated reminders, and Ethan noticed something remarkable before he poured his first cup of coffee. Nobody complained. Lily insisted upon setting spoons beside every bowl, carefully counting twice because 4-year-old certainty occasionally required confirmation. Emma folded napkins with serious concentration while Benjamin polished tin cups until they reflected tiny patches of morning sky. Samuel attempted balancing biscuits upon his elbows, earning amused laughter instead of scolding. Luke rolled his eyes but secretly copied Clara's careful method for slicing apples into equal pieces. Noah simply watched everything unfold, recognizing peaceful routines as precious things easily broken after years of uncertainty. Clara thanked every child for even the smallest contribution. She never praised loudly. Instead, she spoke with quiet sincerity that made ordinary efforts feel meaningful. Benjamin stood straighter whenever she smiled at him. Emma hummed while washing dishes because Clara hummed beside her. Samuel gradually discovered helping could earn more attention than mischief. Ethan observed these changes without mentioning them, uncertain whether gratitude or caution deserved greater loyalty inside his guarded heart. After breakfast, Clara followed Ethan into the vegetable garden carrying a basket and worn gardening gloves. She asked practical questions about the soil, rainfall, and planting seasons rather than attempting pleasant conversation. Ethan answered briefly, surprised she understood crop rotation better than many neighboring ranchers. She explained that kitchens survived because gardens remained healthy, and gardens survived because somebody respected tomorrow as much as today. Her words lingered longer than either expected. The children joined them after chores, each claiming responsibility for a different patch of earth. Noah repaired wooden borders around vegetable beds. Luke loosened stubborn soil with determined swings of his hoe. Samuel carried water buckets without spilling much for once. Benjamin carefully removed weeds one stubborn root at a time. Emma planted herbs while Lily proudly buried seeds almost twice as deep as instructed. Clara gently corrected mistakes without making anyone feel foolish. By afternoon the ranch looked subtly different. Fresh bread cooled beside open windows. Herbs dried beneath the porch roof. Clean curtains fluttered where dusty cloth had once hung forgotten. Ethan realized none of those improvements shouted for attention. They simply whispered that someone cared enough to notice what grief had gradually overlooked. He disliked admitting how deeply that realization unsettled him, because hope demanded risks practical men rarely welcomed willingly. Late that week, Clara suggested every child learn one family recipe instead of merely eating prepared meals. Noah mastered beef stew. Luke learned biscuits. Samuel insisted upon pies despite repeated failures that covered the kitchen with flour from floor to ceiling. Benjamin quietly perfected preserves. Emma delighted in cinnamon cakes. Little Lily proudly memorized exactly how many spoonfuls of honey belonged inside warm tea. Their laughter filled every room previously surrendered to silence. One evening Samuel accidentally dropped an entire pan of biscuits onto the floor. He froze, expecting disappointment. Before Ethan could speak, Clara picked up one flattened biscuit, examined it thoughtfully, and announced that frontier kitchens had invented far worse disasters than slightly dusty bread. Everyone laughed, including Samuel. Together they baked another batch. Ethan watched his son's fear disappear beneath simple forgiveness, wondering why patience sometimes accomplished what strictness never could. Neighbors soon noticed the changing ranch. Wagons passing along the main road slowed slightly as curious eyes examined freshly painted fences, blooming flower boxes, and cheerful children working beside their new bride. Admiration, however, rarely traveled alone. Whispered criticism often rode beside it, smiling politely while sharpening unseen knives. Montana settlements possessed generous hearts, yet gossip could spread across prairie winds faster than wildfire during dry summers. Margaret Collins first arrived carrying blackberry preserves and perfectly arranged sympathy hidden beneath polished manners. She was wealthy, widowed, elegantly dressed, and entirely convinced she understood Ethan's future better than Ethan himself. For years neighbors quietly assumed she would eventually become mistress of the Walker Ranch. She entered confidently, expecting familiar welcome, only to discover Clara kneading dough while 6 children surrounded her with effortless affection. Margaret's pleasant smile tightened almost invisibly. She complimented the tidy house, praised the healthy children, then allowed her gaze to linger upon Clara with calculated curiosity. "Your cook certainly keeps busy," she remarked lightly. Lily immediately corrected her. "She isn't our cook. She's family." The room fell unexpectedly still. Margaret laughed politely, though warmth never reached her eyes, and Ethan sensed invisible tension settling across the kitchen like gathering storm clouds. After Margaret departed, Noah quietly admitted the neighbors had expected someone entirely different. Clara merely nodded. She had spent enough years serving wealthy households to recognize polished insults disguised as courtesy. She refused allowing another person's opinion to season her thoughts. Instead, she returned to preparing supper, humming softly while stirring soup. Ethan admired her composure more than he wished admitting, because dignity often required greater strength than angry defense. Days passed, and the children grew increasingly protective of Clara. Emma proudly carried wildflowers indoors every morning because the kitchen likes pretty things now. Benjamin carved her a wooden spoon after secretly practicing for weeks. Luke repaired loose porch steps before she could stumble. Samuel volunteered for unpleasant chores whenever heavy lifting appeared. Noah silently shouldered extra responsibilities simply because he recognized Clara already carried everyone else's burdens without complaint. One cool afternoon, Ethan returned unexpectedly from repairing distant fencing and found Clara teaching Lily how to read using handwritten recipe cards. Every ingredient became a lesson. Flour began with F. Butter carried B. Cinnamon curved across the page like tiny dancing branches. Lily repeated every word with delighted determination. Ethan leaned quietly against the doorway, realizing Clara transformed ordinary moments into lasting memories without ever announcing remarkable intentions beforehand. That evening, Noah approached Ethan alone beside the barn. The oldest boy rarely requested private conversations, making his hesitant expression impossible to ignore. "She makes this place feel alive," Noah admitted carefully. "I know she isn't Mother and nobody wants her replacing Mother. But maybe hearts aren't barns. Maybe they have room for more than one person." Ethan stared across darkening pasture, unable to answer because the truth hurt beautifully. The following Saturday, Clara traveled into town with Emma and Lily to purchase flour, salt, and sewing thread. While visiting the general store, two fashionable women recognized her from years before. One whispered loudly that she had spent most of her life cooking inside wealthy homes because no respectable gentleman would overlook her size. Another laughed softly, believing Clara could not hear. Clara continued selecting groceries without lifting her head. Unfortunately, Margaret overheard every careless word. Rather than correcting cruel gossip, she encouraged it with subtle questions about Clara's past employment. By sunset, half the settlement repeated polished versions of the same unkind story. Ethan remained unaware until Noah returned from delivering feed and reluctantly revealed what neighbors had been saying. Silence settled between father and son, heavier than winter snow, as distant thunder rolled across the mountains and Clara unknowingly walked home toward whatever tomorrow intended. Rain arrived before dawn, drumming across the ranch roof with relentless determination. Ethan stood beside the barn watching low clouds swallow distant peaks. Noah tightened harnesses without complaint, while Luke secured gates. Samuel gathered blankets, Benjamin stacked firewood, Emma carried lanterns, and Lily hugged Clara's apron because storms always frightened her. Clara knelt beside the little girl, promising that houses built with love could sound loud without falling. By midday icy rain changed into heavy snow, coating fences and wagon tracks until familiar landmarks disappeared. Ethan insisted he and Noah check the north pasture before darkness. Clara quietly handed each man extra scarves and hot coffee inside sturdy tins. "Return before sunset," she said. Ethan nodded absent-mindedly, convinced experience outweighed caution. Clara watched them ride away, uneasy despite saying nothing more. The wind answered for her. It carried silent warnings across frozen fields forever. Hours passed without hoofbeats returning. Dusk settled early beneath thick gray skies. Clara lit every lantern, refusing panic while the younger children watched her face for reassurance. Luke repeatedly climbed the porch steps searching the horizon. Samuel volunteered to ride after Ethan until Noah's absence reminded everyone he had already gone. Benjamin whispered prayers. Emma folded blankets. Lily refused supper. Clara finally made a decision. She would not wait helplessly. She organized the household with calm precision. Luke would remain home protecting the younger children. Samuel and Benjamin would help neighbors gather ropes, shovels, and spare horses. Emma packed bread, dried meat, and hot potatoes inside saddlebags. Lily tucked her favorite knitted scarf into Clara's pocket because brave people needed something warm besides courage. Every child accepted responsibility without argument, trusting Clara completely. Old rancher Thomas Briggs answered Clara's knock before she finished raising her hand. Widowed for decades, Thomas respected action more than speeches. He immediately recognized urgency inside Clara's steady eyes. Within minutes 3 neighboring ranchers joined the search, carrying lanterns and axes. Nobody questioned why Clara assumed leadership. Fear stripped away vanity, leaving only capable hands and determined hearts beneath. The gathering blizzard. Snow erased trails almost instantly. Horses struggled through drifts reaching their knees. Clara remembered a narrow ravine where winter winds often trapped wandering cattle. She guided the search there despite uncertain visibility. Thomas trusted her instinct. The others followed. At last Samuel spotted a broken fence post barely visible beneath snow. Nearby lay Ethan's dropped coffee tin, half buried beneath white silence. Beyond the ravine they discovered Noah struggling beside an overturned wagon. One frightened horse had broken free. Ethan lay pinned beneath shattered timber, unconscious but breathing. Noah's face showed exhaustion beyond his years. He had tried lifting the heavy beam alone for nearly an hour. Relief flooded him when Clara arrived. She immediately directed everyone into careful positions instead of surrendering to panic. Together they freed Ethan. Clara wrapped blankets around him before checking bruises, broken ribs, and shallow breathing with surprising confidence. Years spent cooking for traveling doctors had taught practical skills nobody expected from a frontier cook. She mixed hot water with herbs carried inside her satchel, easing Ethan's breathing enough for the dangerous ride home. Noah stared at her with open admiration. The journey back tested everyone. Wind clawed relentlessly across exposed hills. Twice horses stumbled. Once a frozen creek nearly swallowed Thomas's wagon wheel. Clara refused riding beside Ethan. Instead she walked whenever terrain became dangerous, keeping one hand upon the wagon while encouraging frightened horses with steady words. Her boots soaked through, yet she never mentioned cold, hunger, or exhaustion. They reached the ranch long after midnight. Luke flung open the barn doors before anyone called his name. Samuel burst into grateful tears. Benjamin hurried blankets toward the wagon. Emma heated soup exactly as Clara had taught her. Lily clung silently to Ethan's arm once he awakened briefly. Every child moved with practiced purpose because Clara had already shown them how families faced hardship together. The local doctor arrived before sunrise, examining Ethan carefully. He declared cracked ribs and severe bruising but no lasting injury because help had reached him in time. Turning toward Clara, the physician removed his hat respectfully. "Your judgment saved his life," he said simply. Ethan heard every word despite pretending sleep. Gratitude stirred uneasily beneath layers of stubborn pride and lingering grief. Later that afternoon Ethan awoke fully. Clara sat nearby mending Noah's torn coat while sunlight reflected softly across the quiet room. She looked tired beyond measure, yet content knowing everyone remained safe. Ethan thanked her awkwardly. She answered with a gentle smile and returned to sewing, treating extraordinary courage like another ordinary household task completed before breakfast. That evening Noah approached his father's bed carrying 2 steaming bowls of stew. He placed one beside Ethan and kept the other untouched. "You asked for a wife who could cook," he said quietly. "We found someone who keeps us alive." Ethan looked toward the kitchen where Clara laughed softly after Lily spilled flour across the table again. For the first time since his wife's death, the sound no longer felt like betrayal. Outside, the storm finally passed, revealing a landscape washed clean beneath brilliant morning light. Inside, another storm quietly gathered. A rider from town appeared at the gate carrying folded papers sealed with Margaret Collins's elegant wax mark. Noah accepted the envelope, frowned at the unfamiliar handwriting and silently delivered it to Ethan, unaware the accusations waiting inside threatened everything Clara had patiently built. Ethan broke the seal slowly, expecting another polite invitation or neighborly concern. Instead he found sworn statements claiming Clara had hidden her past, deceived respectable employers, and married only to secure a prosperous ranch. Every sentence sounded carefully crafted to wound without shouting. Margaret had gathered signatures from people who barely knew Clara, wrapping suspicion inside respectable language. Ethan read each page twice, feeling anger rise not toward Clara but toward himself for briefly wondering whether strangers understood the woman living beneath his roof better than he did. Clara entered carrying fresh tea before noticing the papers resting across Ethan's blanket. She recognized the handwriting immediately. A shadow crossed her face, not because the accusation surprised her, but because she had hoped the children might never witness old humiliations following her into another home. She placed the tray upon the bedside table without trembling. Noah stepped beside her. Luke, Samuel, Benjamin, Emma, and Lily quietly gathered behind her, forming an unspoken wall. Ethan looked from the documents to the family surrounding Clara. The choice before him had arrived sooner than expected. He had asked for convenience. Life had delivered courage instead. Outside, distant hoofbeats echoed once more, and whoever approached carried the power either to destroy fragile trust or prove whether this unexpected family truly belonged together. Nobody spoke while the hoofbeats drew nearer, each slow rhythm tightening the silence inside the farmhouse. Lily slipped her small hand into Clara's weathered fingers. Emma lifted her chin bravely despite frightened eyes. Noah moved instinctively between Clara and the doorway. Ethan inhaled carefully against aching ribs, realizing protection sometimes began with believing someone before demanding proof. The knock finally sounded, firm, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. Every heart waited for truth crossing that threshold now. The knock echoed through the farmhouse with measured certainty, neither hurried nor hesitant. Ethan straightened despite the sharp ache in his ribs, while Noah quietly opened the front door. Standing beneath the pale morning sky was Sheriff Daniel Mercer, his weathered hat dusted with melting snow and a leather satchel tucked beneath one arm. He greeted the family respectfully before explaining that several written complaints had been delivered to his office regarding Clara Bennett Walker. Because they carried formal signatures, he was obligated to verify them. Clara nodded without resentment. She had learned long ago that truth often arrived after suspicion, never before it. Sheriff Mercer unfolded the papers one by one, reading each accusation aloud with careful impartiality. The statements claimed Clara had deceived employers, manipulated lonely widowers, and concealed disgraceful behavior during her years working in wealthy homes. Every sentence painted her as calculating rather than compassionate. The children listened with growing disbelief. Lily frowned because none of the words resembled the woman who tucked quilts around frightened children during storms. Emma quietly reached for Clara's hand. Samuel clenched his jaw. Noah watched the sheriff instead of the papers, searching for fairness within the older man's steady expression. When the final accusation ended, silence lingered across the room. Sheriff Mercer folded the documents carefully before looking directly at Clara. "Mrs. Walker," he said evenly, "I've read what others claim. Now I'd like to hear what you have to say." Clara neither hurried nor defended herself with wounded pride. She simply inhaled once before answering. "I've worked in kitchens since I was 16. I cooked because hungry people deserved full tables, and because honest work was the only inheritance my parents left me. I have never stolen, deceived, or pursued any man's fortune. I carried recipes, not schemes." Her voice remained calm enough that even the fire seemed to crackle more softly. Ethan studied her face, searching for hidden fear, yet found only quiet dignity. Clara described years spent serving families who remembered her meals but rarely her name. She spoke of rising before dawn, baking bread through winters, nursing sick children while mothers recovered from illness, and leaving each household with little more than wages and gratitude. She never exaggerated hardship, never pleaded for sympathy, and never once criticized those who had mocked her appearance. The simplicity of her honesty carried more force than any dramatic defense. Sheriff Mercer listened without interruption. When she finished, he slowly removed another folded document from his satchel. "These complaints arrived yesterday," he explained, "but this letter reached my office this morning. The seal belonged to Mrs. Eleanor Whitaker, one of Montana Territory's most respected hotel owners." Mercer opened the letter and began reading aloud. Eleanor described Clara as the finest cook ever employed in her establishment, praising her integrity, generosity, and remarkable habit of feeding hungry travelers who could not afford proper meals, often paying from her own wages rather than allowing children to go without supper. The room fell utterly still. Ethan looked toward Clara with astonishment. She lowered her eyes, embarrassed rather than proud. Noah smiled faintly. Benjamin whispered, "She never told us." Clara answered softly, "Kindness loses something precious when it becomes a story told for applause." Even Sheriff Mercer paused before continuing. Eleanor's letter concluded by warning that anyone questioning Clara's character should instead question the motives of those spreading lies against her. The sheriff folded the paper carefully and placed it above every accusation, allowing truth to rest visibly upon falsehood. Word traveled quickly through the settlement that the sheriff had visited the Walker Ranch. By afternoon, neighbors gathered outside the general store, exchanging rumors with unusual caution. Margaret Collins arrived wearing an elegant traveling coat trimmed with expensive fur, greeting everyone with polished confidence. She believed public opinion already belonged to her. Instead, conversations quieted as Ethan rode into town beside Clara in the family wagon. None of the children had wished to remain behind. Every one of them climbed aboard before sunrise, determined that if Clara faced another trial, she would never face it alone. The annual harvest gathering had already begun when they reached the town square. Long wooden tables displayed preserves, pies, vegetables, quilts, and carved tools celebrating another season's labor. Music drifted from a fiddler beneath the meeting hall porch, though cheerful melodies gradually faded as people noticed the Walker family arriving together. Margaret stepped forward gracefully, offering a smile polished enough to reflect sunlight. "Ethan," she said warmly, "I hoped we might speak before unfortunate misunderstandings grew worse." Her eyes shifted toward Clara with carefully disguised satisfaction. Before Ethan could answer, Margaret addressed the gathering loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. She suggested that generous hearts often overlooked dangerous deception. She hinted that lonely men became easy targets. She questioned whether children truly understood the difference between affection and manipulation. Every sentence sounded reasonable until examined closely. Clara stood silently, refusing interruption. The children stiffened around her. Lily buried her face against Clara's skirt. Samuel looked ready to argue. Noah gently rested one hand upon his brother's shoulder, silently urging patience. Margaret finally turned toward Clara directly. "Surely," she declared, "you cannot expect respectable people to believe a wandering cook simply became the perfect wife overnight." Several uneasy murmurs rippled through the crowd. Clara lifted her chin, prepared to answer, but Ethan stepped forward first. His injured ribs protested every movement, yet determination carried him farther than comfort ever could. He removed his hat slowly, not from obligation but from respect for the truth he intended to speak. "When Clara arrived," Ethan began, his steady voice carrying across the square, "I wasn't looking for love. I was looking for convenience. I wanted someone to cook meals, wash clothes, and make my difficult life easier. I judged her before learning her name. I listened to appearances before paying attention to character. That failure belongs entirely to me." Every face remained fixed upon him. Even Margaret's practiced confidence faltered slightly. "She never asked my children to love her," Ethan continued. "She earned their trust one ordinary day at a time. She never replaced their mother because no one could. Instead, she honored the memories already living inside this family while giving us new ones strong enough to stand beside them. During the blizzard, she risked her own life without hesitation. When neighbors whispered behind her back, she answered with kindness instead of bitterness. If those qualities make her unworthy, then every decent person here should fear becoming worthy themselves." A hush settled across the gathering. Thomas Briggs stepped forward first. "I was there during the storm," he announced. "I trust Mrs. Walker with my life." The local doctor nodded immediately afterward. "Without her judgment," he added, "Ethan Walker would likely be dead." Mrs. Eleanor Whitaker herself emerged unexpectedly from another wagon arriving moments earlier. She had traveled through the night after hearing rumors. Standing before the entire settlement, she confirmed every word written inside her letter and described Clara's years of quiet generosity in remarkable detail. One by one, more voices joined theirs. Travelers remembered warm meals freely given. Mothers recalled Clara comforting frightened children. Ranch hands spoke of food left anonymously for injured workers. The stories differed, yet every memory carried the same unmistakable thread. Clara had spent years building a reputation through humble acts nobody expected to become evidence someday. Margaret looked around desperately, discovering that carefully planted suspicion withered quickly beneath living testimony. For the first time since arriving in Montana, Clara herself stepped forward. She faced Margaret without anger. "You wanted people to believe I measured worth by wealth," she said gently. "If that were true, I would never have chosen a ranch where 6 grieving children needed far more love than money." Her words carried no triumph, only quiet honesty. Margaret searched for another argument but found none waiting. Sheriff Mercer approached the center of the square and publicly tore the accusations into small pieces. The wind scattered them across the road like dry leaves. "This matter is finished," he declared firmly. "False statements have no place in this town." No applause followed. Respect required something quieter than celebration. Ethan turned toward Clara, emotion finally overcoming years of restraint. Before neighbors, friends, and strangers alike, he reached for her hands. "I asked you here because I believed my children needed a mother," he said softly. "I understand now that I needed courage just as badly. Clara Bennett Walker, if you still choose this family after everything we've placed upon your shoulders, I promise never again to let another voice speak louder than yours inside our home." Tears shimmered within Clara's hazel eyes, though her smile remained steady. "I chose this family the morning Lily called me Mama," she whispered. "Everything afterward was simply waiting for you to believe it too." The children rushed forward together, surrounding them in a laughing embrace that dissolved the final distance between stranger and family. Townspeople watched quietly, many blinking away unexpected tears. Even those who had doubted Clara lowered their heads with humbled expressions. The harvest festival slowly resumed, yet something profound had shifted beneath the ordinary rhythm of the day. A woman once dismissed as unwanted had become the heart of the Walker Ranch before an entire community. As evening settled across the valley and the family prepared to return home together, an unexpected rider appeared at the edge of town carrying urgent news from the distant railroad station, news that would test their newly forged happiness in ways none of them could yet imagine.